This is Huck Norris. Like a lot of good ideas, it's deceptively simple. It's essentially a strip of high-density foam that sits inside your tyre and is designed to stop you getting punctures. So if you hit a rock on the trail, the kind of impact that would normally pinch the tyre against the rim, this is here to cushion the blow and protect the tyre and the rim from damage. It goes inside the standard tubeless setup with normal sealant and valves. The question is, does it work? To find out, I've been running it in my bike for the last 6 months, and I've been using deliberately lightweight tyres like the Maxxis Exo casing or Schwalbe snakeskin casing, just to give it that bit more of a challenge. In all that time, I've done quite a lot of riding in really rocky places like Bike Park Wales, as well as racing the EWS in Finale Ligure. I've taken it bikepacking in Gran Canaria, where there was a lot of rocks, and in all that time, I've only got one puncture. I think for me, running these kind of tyres, even tubeless, I'd expect far more punctures than that normally. So it does seem to work in that sense. Installation is pretty simple. It's a little bit harder to get the tyre on with the insert inside it. You might have to use tyre levers where you otherwise wouldn't need to, but essentially it's pretty straightforward. And when it comes to inflating tubeless, it does seem to help the tyre kind of grip onto the rim that little bit easier. So inflation, I think, is slightly easier too. So you may think it's just any old strip of foam, but it's been water cut into this shape for a good reason. Basically, the engineers found that if it didn't have this zigzag shape, then it impacted on rolling resistance because it rubbed against the tyres. But they claim that with this shape, it has almost no impact on rolling resistance. And I haven't tested this scientifically, but it definitely doesn't feel like it's impacting on your rolling speed. So something the manufacturers claim is that you can run lower tyre pressures. And this may be true or it may not be, depending on what kind of riding you do. Basically, you want to get as low a tyre pressure as you can get because it gives you more grip, more comfort, and also in the real world, it might roll faster too. But there are two things that limit how low you can go with your tyre pressures. One is kind of squirm and burping and the tyre moving around on the rim in the corners. And this isn't really going to help with that. So for kind of bike park riding where it's quite smooth and you're really hitting corners very hard, it's not really going to affect how low you can go with pressure there. But if you do more natural riding with a lot of sharp rocks and what have you, then you may be able to get away with lower pressures without risking puncturing. For me though, the pressure I choose to run largely depends on how kind of firm the tyre stays on the rim and how much squirm you get. So I chose to run about the same tyre pressures. What it does allow you to do though is to run a lighter weight tyre, which even with the Huck Norris could weigh slightly less, but also means that your tyres will roll faster because a thinner casing will roll a lot faster than a kind of thicker downhill casing that you might otherwise have to run to avoid getting punctures. But if you run the same tyres at the same kind of pressures, you can't really tell that it's there. It doesn't have a big effect on the ride quality. It's only if you hit into something really hard that it sounds slightly different and you're much less likely to get punctures, and that's really the only thing you notice. When I got back from that trip to Italy, I took the Huck Norris out and noticed it was absolutely covered in kind of battle scars from where I had impacted rocks and the Huck Norris had kind of done its job. Obviously not all of those would correlate to a puncture if I wasn't using Huck Norris. You can quite often hit your tyre against the rim without it puncturing. But I would be very surprised if I wouldn't have got far more punctures if I hadn't been running the Huck Norris on that trip. There was a lot of really rocky terrain and I was running pretty lightweight tyres. So if your Huck Norris starts to get as threadbare as this one is, you might want to think about replacing it. Just because if you happen to hit the same point of the Huck Norris 2 times, it won't provide the same protection the same time because the cells of the foam can break down. And this is where we get to the bad news. They're quite a lot of money for what is essentially just a piece of foam. At the moment they come in packs of 2, which includes a nice little mudguard, and that costs £55 or €69. But the guys at Huck Norris told me that you will soon be able to buy them as an individual unit, and that will cost €34.90. While out filming, I got a little bit silly and managed to land a 5-foot drop directly onto quite a substantial root. This was enough force to destroy my DT Swiss EX1501 wheel, which is the same rim that Aaron Gwynn managed to ride down Leogang without a tyre on, so it's a really tough rim, but I completely destroyed the wheel. But interestingly, the tyre with the Huck Norris inside was still inflated. So if it was a race run, I could have probably made it to the bottom. For me, I think that's a pretty good demonstration of how it can protect your tyre even under a really massive impact. However, Huck Norris also claimed that this product protects your rims as well as your tyres. And I think that may be true for sort of small scuffs and dents, particularly in carbon rims. But if you hit something hard enough to damage an aluminium rim, I don't think this product is really going to do much to mitigate that. On our scales, it weighs about 84 grams per tyre, although once you put it in the tyre and it absorbs a little bit of sealant, it weighs about 120 grams, depending on what type of sealant you use and how much. So you might want to bear that in mind and add a little bit more sealant than you normally would to your tyre. So that 120 gram per wheel weight penalty may sound like quite a lot, but it can allow you to run lighter tyres if you choose to. And bear in mind something like Schwalbe's Procore weighs about 230 grams. It may seem like a lot of money for what it is, but it definitely does work. And if you really hate getting punctures, I think it's worth a look.